Welcome to the 2017 opening convocation event. We're glad to have you all here with us today as we kick off another great school year. Two quick housekeeping items. Please turn off silence your cell phone or other noisemakers that could disrupt today's event. Also, please check the school song section of your program. If you have a district bear logo rather than the paw, congratulations, you've won a prize. Bring your program to the tent outside after the event and choose a prize from the collection of great bear homecoming gear. And now, sit back and enjoy the show. Strong schools, strong community, strong tomorrows. Please join us in standing for the national anthem, performed by South Campus senior Cameron Pierce.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Cameron. We now turn your attention to the big screens for a message from our school board. With the help of students of all ages, our 7 board members share their definitions of strong schools, community, and tomorrows.
Strong schools means
providing all-inclusive, positive learning community which welcomes diversity and supports students' academic, social, and emotional growth.
Having the resources and great staff to ensure every child succeeds.
students are provided meaningful opportunities to learn and expand their awareness of the world and all of its wonders.
Every student has an opportunity to be successful in a safe and inclusive environment.
Ensuring programs of interest to all students that are relevant to modern workforce needs.
Strong leaders for our future.
Receiving adequate funding in the community. Parents, school board, and school district, staff all working together respectfully, collaboratively, and with integrity to provide students with the best educational experience possible.
Students at every level and background are welcomed, encouraged, challenged.
Strong community means a group of people committed to the safety and success of each other and of the whole.
Preserving our planet for our children.
People know and look after one another and build traditions that bring people together, giving all senses of belonging.
Every person and every organization feels pride and ownership in their school district.
Having strong schools along with houses of worship and faith-based organizations, businesses, and places of employment that are vibrant, and residents who care deeply about the community and its members.
The district works in partnership with all of its stakeholders toward the goal of creating strong schools.
The White Bear area is inclusive for all residents and offers programs to meet the needs of all who live here.
Having active and engaged residents, businesses, and political leaders that support the school community and know strong schools attract families and businesses to the community.
Strong tomorrows means
A bright future made possible by today's hard work by caring people.
More opportunities for everyone.
providing good payment, employment, opportunities so that the financial needs of seniors as well as young people are met.
The district has a commitment being aware of world, country, and local trends.
We value and find strength in our differences and believe collaboration is more important than competition.
Continuing the tradition of a strong community with strong schools.
Building lifelong learners and leaders and ensuring every student graduates prepared for a future as a productive adult.
The district works to ensure the education provided to our students prepares them to successfully enter and engage the world they will experience upon graduation.
Next, we welcome to the stage 2017 Teacher of the Year, our very own Nick Marty. Mr. Marty, who is beginning his 8th year in the district, is a digital learning specialist and a 5th grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary.
And welcome back. Some of us have been working hard over these past 3 months, and others, like myself, are starting to emerge from our summer slumbers. Hopefully everyone's getting ready to tackle the next chapter in this exciting adventure that we choose to be a part of every year. Over the summer, I dove into a book by an author named Matt Miller, and inside of it, he asked this question: what was the first thing you did whenever you received a new yearbook as a student? Think about that for a minute. And now don't lie, you went and found your own picture, just like I did. And then after that, you probably searched out your siblings, your friends, scoured the extra activities pages and candid photos that filled up your yearbook to find any other place that you and the people you were closest to showed up. But the question is why? Why do people do that? Well, we do that because those pictures have meaning to us. Those pictures connect us back to memories, feelings, stories. We do that because the relationships we make matter. Now, I grew up in a relatively small town a little north of here called Pine City, home of the Dragons, the Pizza Pub, and 4 big-time stoplights. My mother, she was a kindergarten and 1st grade teacher in the district, and a pretty good one at that. She was the kind of teacher that families requested to have, and that former students would take their time to come visit. After each school day, during my early elementary years, I'd bop down to her classroom. Most of the time, I'd get to pop in the newest version of the Oregon Trail into her new Apple CD-ROM computer and try to survive the epic journey across country. Now, my friends were very envious of me at the time because I got to play it whenever I wanted, and not just during the 30 minutes of computer lab time we got each week. As I would play those awesome games, a bit of me would be nervous. I would wait with bated breath to hear that one phrase that would put a pit into my stomach. Still to this day, it replays in slow motion in my mind. My mom would put her finger up like this and go, "Grocery stop before home, Nick, and no complaints." Oh yeah, I got the teacher point on that one. Now, why do you ask would a simple trip to the grocery store be the one thing that I would dread with such passion each week? Well, to understand that, you have to understand who I was at that time, and I was a fairly simple creature. I lived for a few things: my buddies, the Chicago Bulls, Pogs, which were the fidget spinner craze of my elementary day. I thought they were going to be huge. And then the Power Rangers. Now, the Power Rangers was a brand new hit TV show and toy line. In a nutshell, it was about 5 teenagers who were given medallions by a floating head named Zordon, who it granted them powers and robots to battle an evil sorceress that had been unlocked, or had been set free from her prison on the moon. You know, pretty simple stuff, but I was hooked. Well, the show started every day at 4 o'clock. We left school about 3:30, so if you do the math, that means I had about 20 minutes to get my mother in and out of Nelson's Market so I could be home to see the show. I had dubbed myself the Maroon Ranger and knew that I had some couch cushions that were up to some sort of shenanigans that I would have to vanquish. Only child, had to improvise. If you've ever lived in a small town, then you know that grocery shopping can be a bit of a social outing. Add in a popular teacher mom who had the superpower she called the gift of gab, and a 20-minute trip would be no easy task. I knew she'd stop at the meat department because she had his grandsons in her class, and the cashiers would most likely be the volleyball girls that she coached. Nothing I could do there. It was the aisles that would be the crucial stage for me to navigate. Some tough choices and sacrifices were going to have to be made if I was going to get home. Things like, did I really need fruit by the foot that week? Bread isn't that important, is it, Mom? Could we skip an aisle altogether? Needless to say, we rarely made it home by 4 o'clock. She would never rush any of the conversations and always told me that taking time to let people know you care is one of the most important things that a teacher and just a person in general can do. As I grew older, I started to understand what she meant, but it wasn't until my mom passed away a few years ago that I got to experience the difference all of those conversations, those connections made. At her wake and funeral, I swear the entire town of Pine City came out. I met numerous people I didn't know or had traveled from a far distance to tell me memories that they had of Mom. What struck me, though, was that all of the stories talked about how she had made them feel valuable and how she seemed to be having so much fun in her classroom. Relationships matter. With our students, with our staff, with parents, with community members, it all matters. It all helps to create a sense of belonging. It helps to create a sense of meaning. I remind myself of that fact as I start each school year. With the excitement comes a little anxiety about setting up routines, getting all the forms back, and that daunting task of trying to figure out when I'm going to fit in all of my curriculum. Not to mention having to switch my brain from summer Nick organized, in which Jenna can tell you that I always have tomorrow to put it away, to teammate Pam Johnstone hyper-organized. Let's just say this week is going to be a bit of an adjustment time for both of us. Content drives our instruction, but let's take time early this year to build those connections. No matter your role, learn how to pronounce a student's name correctly because it matters. Figure out what a student and their family values because it matters. And show them on day one that this is going to be a special year. Because it's such a fun time to be a learner. Information and learning is at the tip of our fingers all the time. If you want to learn about the ancient Greeks, you can look it up online. Love to write poetry? Start a blog and share your ideas with others who have the same passion. Have your sump pump go out in the middle of a rainstorm? Watch a YouTube video to figure out how to install a new one. There's so much content out there that now more than ever, we need great educators who can help guide students on what to do with it all and to help them build value and meaning in what they're learning. Yes, content knowledge is important, but focusing on collaboration, problem solving, and allowing students to create something every single day should be the foundations of who we are as a district. Those are the skills that those are the skills that will prepare them for the world they're going to live in, not the one we grew up in. I was lucky enough to have one of those teachers in 6th grade who did just that. Mr. Johnson. Oh, Mr. Johnson with your killer mustache. I mean, that thing was Tom Selleck good. Not even lying. He got to challenge my when are we actually going to ever use this stuff attitude by putting me totally in charge of running our fantasy basketball league in our classroom. Each week, I'd approve trades, adjust rosters, and update standings. But oh yeah, I'd also average out statistics, look at data patterns, and write a recap or power rankings article each week, all while learning to keep a deadline. And at that time, it was all paper and pencil. Mr. Johnson made it real for me. It wasn't worksheets that I had no connection with, and it didn't take him hours of endless planning. He just got to know what made me tick and helped to give value to the skills he wanted me to learn. That year changed my entire attitude of what school could be. His effort mattered to me. And that's what we want, isn't it? We want our schools to be places that students look forward to coming back to every day, where meaningful learning happens frequently and students are engaged and on task. So as you plan this year, ask yourself, would I want to do this task myself? Would I be engaged in this lesson? And keep asking yourself that. As my colleague Abby Kath once stated to me, sometimes off task is not off task. What I had them doing was boring. We should strive to make sure that what happens on the first day of school makes students want to come running back on day 2, and then try to repeat that process another 170 plus times. Now trust me, I get it. That's not an easy task, and each day isn't going to be an Oscar-winning performance, but that's why we have each other. That's why connecting with other educators to help tackle this ever-changing profession can only benefit the students that walk through our doors. Don't be an island. We're stronger together because relationships matter. As you go off into your different worlds these next few days, I say to you, good luck. and ask you to challenge yourself to be the professional each different student needs you to be. Be the game changer that helps them bring out the very best version of who they can be. Thank you so much, and have a great school year.
Casimir Zach. Casimirak. Casmirak. Zach.
Casimirak? This is not working.
Casimir Kazak. Kazmarak Zach.
Kazimiritschak.
Kazmarzak. Krazrax.
Casmirzak.
Kazmir Zach.
Kazmiruk Zach?
It's Kazmerchek, Kazmerchek, or you can call me Dr. K.
Now that we've got his name down, please welcome new Superintendent Dr. Wayne Kazmerchek.
Mic check. Oh, there we go. A little fun to get us started. And the funny thing is, this happened a couple of times this morning already. People stopping to ask how to pronounce my name. When in doubt, please just call me Wayne. I would appreciate that very much. So you may have guessed that my name is Polish. My great-great-grandparents on both sides of my family emigrated from Poland and settled in Minnesota. I grew up in the northwestern town of Stephen, very small town in the northwestern corner, just south of the Canadian border, just east of the Minnesota-North Dakota border. 30 years ago, right now, 30 years ago, and by the way, Nick, that image of you in kindergarten in 1990 made me feel really old, by the way. So 30 years ago, I was beginning my senior year of high school, and that year culminated with a trip to the Minnesota State High School League track meet. Made it to the state meet, and it was hosted by none other than White Bear Lake Area High School South Campus. So this photo was taken the day we left for the state meet, and you might notice a big difference between this younger version of myself and the one who stands before you today. So just take a guess. You're right, I'm about 15 pounds heavier now than I was back then. Nothing to do with the hair. So my career journey to White Bear Lake began as I was a high school business education teacher and coach for several years, and then I was a superintendent in a small rural Minnesota school district for 3 years. I was in Moorhead as the assistant superintendent for 6 years before coming to White Bear Lake a little over 3.5 years ago. I worked as the district's assistant superintendent for finance and operations before becoming the district's 9th superintendent on July 1st. So just think about that. I'm the 9th superintendent in this district in 124 years of this school district. Only 9 superintendents. I can think of school districts where that would be the case in about a dozen years, where you can come up with 9 names. But just think about that. This is indicative of the kind of place this is. People come here and they want to stay here, they want to raise a family here, and they want to come back to this place as well if they do leave. So there were several things that occurred in my lead up to making the decision to move to White Bear Lake about 4 years ago. One of the signs was this. On the morning that I was driving down to White Bear Lake from Moorhead for my second interview for my first job here 4 years ago, on I-94, and if you've driven that road, it's not the most exciting stretch of road, but I've driven it probably hundreds of times. And that morning I saw a bear on the side of the road for the first time. Quite a coincidence. Now, it wasn't a talking bear as far as I know, but if it had been, you know what it would have said. So now say it with me. Go Bears, right. Well, that wasn't too bad. I was expecting a lot quieter crowd for this early in the morning. Today's theme of strong schools, strong community, strong tomorrows is one you'll hear quite a bit this fall, as it helps to guide us through some important initiatives this year. But let's consider each of these for a moment. Strong schools. I've been in your schools. When I visit with staff members, when I visit with parents, there's such a great sense of pride in every one of our schools. It's almost as if you could interchange what's said at Birch Lake with what's said at Matoska or with what's said at South. There is a great sense of pride in each and every one of our schools. Strong community. White Bear Lake Area Schools comprises 10 municipalities: Birchwood, Gem Lake, Hugo, Lino Lakes, Little Canada, Maplewood, North Oaks, Vadnais Heights, White Bear Lake, and White Bear Township. But as we serve families, we are one community, White Bear Nation. Strong tomorrows. We are a growing school district. Last year, we worked with a demographer to provide us 5-year and 10-year enrollment projections. With the base year of last year, our base year enrollment, K-12 enrollment, was 8,200. We're projected to grow up to 9,000 students within 5 years, K-12, so an increase of 800 students. In 10 years, that grows to roughly 9,500. Now, keep in mind, these estimates might very likely be low. They're only based on housing developments that were approved as of last March, and we know that there have been more subsequent to that date, and we know there are other projects in place. So we're a growing district. After years of declining enrollment, we've turned the corner. This growth will present challenges as we manage it, but it's a good place to be. We're a changing school district. 6 years ago, our students spoke 25 home languages other than English. Last year, that figure was almost doubled. A decade ago, approximately 84% of our students were white. Last school year, that percentage was 75%. We have to consider a changing student body. We must continue to examine our data to see that each and every one of our students is growing and learning. We must ensure that all students have access to opportunities. And we have a great example of a significant change that was made to make sure that our students do have opportunities. We closed a significant opportunity gap in the last year. So 2 years ago, 77% of our students, of our high school students, took a college credit-bearing course. Last year, that grew to 80%. But if you dig in a little deeper on the data, our students of color increased from 60 to 85% year over year. Last year, our graduates had taken between 70 and 80%, or 70 and 80% of our graduates had taken such a class, regardless of race or family income. This change is significant. This happened because we removed barriers that were preventing some students from accessing these opportunities. This is an example of what can happen when we come together and make systemic changes to close opportunity gaps. So as we look ahead to the coming year, there are 3 things you should all be aware of. First, we are beginning a strategic planning process. A planning team will be coming together in mid-September to begin this work. There will be opportunities for all of you to get involved if you wish. There will be opportunities to be part of action planning teams that will undoubtedly shape the future of our school district. So if you want to get involved, please send me an email, and we'll reach out to you as the process unfolds to invite you into one of those groups. Our school board will act on a new strategic plan this spring. We're hoping that March is the date that we get take action on it. And as many of you are aware, another critical issue facing us as we begin this school year is the renewal of our operating levy. Our operating levy generates about 15% of our overall budget. So it's important. Our budget is a little over $100 million, and so 15% of that is through our local operating levy. So the renewal is we're asking for the same amount that we currently receive. We're not asking for more. So there won't be a tax increase. The renewal request is for 10 years, which will provide a decade of financial stability as we move forward. This past spring, we conducted a survey of our district residents. Support for the school district is very strong. The survey revealed that the public trusts that we are good stewards of the public's money. We have a AA bond rating, one of only a handful of districts in Minnesota. That allows us to borrow money at a very competitive interest rate, and it saves our taxpayers dollars. We've been recognized for our financial reporting for 17 consecutive years by two organizations, the Government Finance Officers Association and the Association of School Business Officials. The survey revealed that the public trusts the district to manage tax revenues. Our residents believe in us, in part because they have watched us work in partnership with community organizations, local universities and international schools, and our municipalities, some of whom are represented in the audience today. In the survey, we learned that 69% of respondents supported renewing the operating levy based on what they knew at the time, at the very moment they were asked that question. But once respondents heard about some of the programs that have been supported by these funds, support grew to 75%. And once they knew that there would be no tax increase, support rose to 82%. That's a strong indicator that our community supports our public schools. Programs that had the greatest impact on this statistic were those that increased student opportunities. For example, our options to earn college credit, which I highlighted earlier, our work with career pathways, and our continued efforts to help each of our students succeed. Our community believes that we are doing well. When asked what grade they would give the White Bear Lake area schools, 83% of respondents who offered an opinion chose a grade of A or B. This is higher than what it was back in 2011. That's when the district last had a successful renewal election. We should all be proud that our great work with students has garnered such growing community support. Our current and future successes rely on each of us, often in the most simple ways. We live in an interesting time. Minnesota's student population is changing, and White Bear area student population is changing as well. Last spring, more than 40 metro school districts, including many participants from White Bear Lake, took part in community conversations about Minnesota's education system. A sense of urgency emerged from that work with the following priorities. Number one, schools must have effective, diverse staff members and stakeholders who build trusting relationships to create welcoming classrooms, schools, and communities that meet the needs, hopes, and dreams of all students and families. Secondly, schools must provide personalized, relevant education and youth development that guarantees access to rigorous learning and eliminates predictability based on race. And three, equitable resources, including time, talent, and funds, must be aligned to student needs that enable every district to see all and serve all. Our community and our students expect the following from us: that we embrace each and every student who enters our schools, that we are open to change how we educate if that is what best serves our students, that we support each of our students as they learn about themselves and grow as human beings, that we do not ignore social unrest that we experience in our country, our state, or our communities, and that we provide our students with a place to process what is going on in our world, that we are that safe place that allows opinions to be heard and to be afforded a respectful response. Our schools are strong only if everyone feels a part of the community. Our community is strong only if we connect to everyone in the community. And our tomorrows are strong only if we focus on each student's needs. Never underestimate the power of positive relationships. To reiterate some of what Mr. Marty shared, relationships do matter. Each and every one of you impacts our children on a daily basis. You provide a friendly, warm, welcoming face in the morning as you give our students a safe ride to school. You are welcoming as our students enter our buildings each day and as they stop for breakfast. Our students rely on us to challenge them so that they grow, to provide opportunities for them to be physically active. They come to school to be with friends and socialize. They come to school because school is safe. And thank you for the part that you play in that. Together we ensure that the strength of our schools, the strength of our community, and the strength of our students' tomorrows. Let's have a great year, and go Bears.
And now, as we celebrate creating equity-focused schools, we welcome to the stage Jamie Almazan of the Equity Collaborative. Jamie has worked with the district for the past 2 years as we continue to build strong schools, strong community, and strong tomorrows. Welcome, Jamie.
Buenos dias. Of those 50 languages that are now in the district, thank you, I speak 3. Jamie is my first name, Almanzan is I'm gonna get that next, is my last name. I'm mixed race. My mom is Mexican. I was raised by my mom's parents, first generation Mexican immigrants. My dad is white Irish from Southern Illinois, from Decatur, Illinois, so I speak English, Spanish, and hillbilly. Hillbilly wasn't listed, just saying. I grew up, I'm from California, where the population change has been happening for quite some time. In fact, my grandmother used to say to me, when people would ask her, where are you from? She's like, I'm from here, you moved the border. Right? Exactly, that's why it's called San Francisco. There's a town in California, in Central Valley called Manteca. Manteca means lard. I'm pretty sure that anybody who lives in Manteca doesn't actually realize that their town is called lard. Otherwise you'd change it, right? You'd go, hey, our town is called lard. I come as I'm honored to be asked by Wayne, Dr. K, and having done that very same thing, I don't know, they're like, who's the superintendent there? I'm like, this guy with a name. They're like, so, my name's super easy. That I've been working with the district for a while around equity, and being asked by Wayne to be a part of the opening is a huge honor. It means a lot to me that I get to stand on the stage with you all today. In fact, when I share these kinds of things with my mother knows, my mother's with my little one. I have a 5-year-old who's in kinder, and she just texted this morning to say they're on their way. And she asked me things, she's like, where are you going, mijito? What are you gonna do? And I said, well, I'm going to Minnesota, I'm going to speak there, and I'm speaking at a bunch this week. And she said things like, why do they want you? And I'm like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. So the honor is not lost on me. I'm really flattered. I would like to open with this. The idea of strong schools, strong community, strong tomorrows. That means something to me. I want to know what it means to you. The keynote that I'm going to do today is going to have a moment or two where I'm going to ask you to actually process. And the reason why I'm going to ask you to process information is this. There's a wonderful book by Dr. Sharon Ritchie. She's out of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And it's called First School. It's spectacular. She looked at research, basically, what are the pedagogical moves? What's the instruction that makes the biggest difference on kids? What helps kids? And she measured everything. She measured teacher walks up slowly to kid. She measured teacher kneels down to kid's level. Teacher looks at kid, doesn't look at kid, like literally everything. And what she found, one of the things that she found was that when kids have time to process the information for themselves, they learn. In other words, when teachers process information more than kids process information, they learn less. That's because as a teacher, if I talk more than they talk, I'm doing the processing for them. I'm telling them, here's how to think about this idea. And so I love this as I think about myself as a teacher. I have a video of myself as a teacher in 1990, right? Like, damn. He's like, oh, I was in the computer lab. I'm like, I got a typewriter when I went to college. Like, it was killer. It was an IBM with the ball. It was awesome. Like, it went so fast. Like, the idea of a computer, I was like, geez, that's nice. That's fancy. That when I was a teacher, I have this video of me, and I am literally the entire period. I'm teaching ELs, English language learners, at a high school in San Jose, in East San Jose. And in this video of a 50-minute period of me watching myself teach, I am talking the entire time. The entire time I talk, kids don't talk at all, the entire time. Then, it's also dark. I've turned the lights down because I have an overhead projector. And I'm using an overhead projector. It's making a quiet hum the entire time. At one point, I actually think my head is in the overhead projector. And as I watch this 50-minute video of dark room, quiet hum, I'm like, who's awake here? Like, what was I thinking? It's because I taught the way I was taught. I fell into patterns that I already knew what I thought was the best way to go. And so what I'd like to start with is your own processing. I'd like to ask you to process a little bit as we go along. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to process is strong schools, strong communities, strong tomorrows. What the hell does that mean? Like, literally, I want to know. What do you think that means? What does that mean for you as a member of this school community? Turn to an elbow partner. Off the top of your head, I think of this. Go. Couple minutes. All right. I believe in a few things. I'm a deep believer in public education. A deep believer in public ed. I've been in public education for over 25 years now, and I started as a special ed teacher, K-5. I did that first. I often joke that that's what not to do with the least experienced teacher. Right? I didn't even know what IEP stood for, right? But the principal was like, well, you'd be great at this. And I'm like, sure, I would, you're right. Only now, after being a principal, do you realize I'm like, oh, you didn't have someone. That was it. Like, there wasn't a person. From that to teaching high school, where I talked about me and the overhead projector, I taught at a very large, comprehensive high school in East Side San Jose. There was 5,500 students at that high school, really, really big. And then from there to teaching middle school at the middle school that I went to. I am from Palo Alto, California, where Stanford University is. The reason why I'm from there is because my parents got married. Actually, truthfully, I think I'm a product. I exist because my dad got drafted. Like, literally, my dad got drafted to go to the Vietnam War. He was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Maybe I should marry you, right? And ta-da, I exist. And as a result, when it all ended, my parents actually got divorced when he came back. And I ended up being raised by my mom's parents, both during the time that he was gone and then while after the war. And the experience of being in Palo Alto and understanding myself as a Mexican, I was being raised by Mexicans, I never really thought of myself as anything but that thing. And it's only after having gone to Mexico do you realize how not Mexican you are, right? Like, I'm fully, I think of myself as Mexican, and then I go there and I get sick. And you're like, right, I'm from here. That I was raised in Palo Alto because my grandfather was the first Mexican to graduate from Stanford University. And as a result of that, coming from Los Angeles up to Palo Alto, as a result of that, when his son, my eldest uncle, Roberto, was graduated from high school in East LA at Garfield High School, which is where, if you've ever seen the movie Stand and Deliver, right? You see the movie with Jaime Escalante, the math, calculus, right? He went there. There were a class of 400, 2 went to college. 2. He's one of them, and he went to Stanford. He goes to Stanford because my grandfather went to Stanford. He is what's called a legacy. And so he gets to the university in the 50s and realizes, though he's top of the class at Garfield, he's woefully underprepared. He can't write at the same level. He can't read at the same level. And he gets his butt kicked. He is about to fail out, come home. My grandparents say, you know what? No way, that's not possible. We're gonna move home to university. So they moved. They left LA, they left their entire family, and moved to Palo Alto. In fact, when my mother ends up going to high school in Palo Alto, my mother, first time she gets to Palo Alto, she sees all of these fancy houses, all of these things. She's like, how are we moving from that to this? That's crazy, how is this happening? And she sees a squirrel for the first time. She'd never seen a squirrel, and she goes, oh, the rats, that's why. People, they had cheap houses, all the rats around here. She had never seen a squirrel. going from there to Palo Alto is what causes me to be born and raised in this town, and I want to make a connection to the concept of public ed, meaning that there are two things that I love about it. One is related to Nick's idea of what Mr. Johnson did for him, and that is that the ed part, the learning part, is amazing. In fact, is anybody else into the neuroscience of learning? That's probably my newest thing that I think I love reading about, is how the human being's brain takes up new information. They can map. When you learn a new idea, a new thing, a new skill, they can map which neurons fire. That's amazing. When we learn something new and feel confident about that new thing, when we're like, I got it, that moment where you go, I did it, did you see me do it, did you see me do it? That, more neurons fire than in any other thing. More than anything else. The closest they can do, the closest similar idea is when people talk about the experience of love. That when people talk about the experience of being loved or giving love, the same number of neurons fire. I think that blows my mind, that love and learning are so linked. To hear him talk about Mr. Johnson makes me go, he learned to love learning in this moment. That's the ed part. The public part, though, has become the thing that I think is the most amazing part about being from here, being from the United States. Public means everyone. It's for everyone. And so when I think of strong school, strong community, I think of that. I think of this is the opportunity to actually fulfill the promise of everyone. We could do that. That's what makes us strong, is everyone. And so I want to have us have a conversation consistently about, though we believe in everyone, how come we can't? How come that's hard for us? Where do we struggle? How come I struggled so much with that as a teacher? And that's the thing that I want to talk about today. I start with this idea, if I can get to it, if it'll let me. There we go. Of starting with the why. Has anybody ever read or heard of Simon Sinek's work on starting with the why? Raise your hand if you've heard this idea. A few of you. So here's the idea. The idea is simple. And he's got a TED Talk. It's mildly interesting. He's smart. He's super smart. Basically, that most of us know what we're going to do. In fact, as we go back into our classrooms for the first day, we go back into our schools, most of us know that we got a lesson plan ready. We know what we might say to open. You could see both Wayne and Nick have some scripts. Those are whats. The script is a what. This PowerPoint is a what. The plan is a what. The how is sort of the implementation of those whats. How do we get the message across that makes a difference for folks? That's the how. Sharon Ritchie's work is a how. Kids processing more than teachers processing. That's a how. The why is the reason we do it in the first place. Why are you here? I'm here because, honestly, I've been honored to be a part of White Bear Lake before, and Wayne asked me. That's it. Those are the two. If Wayne didn't ask me, I would have believed my mother, why do they want you? I don't know. I'm probably not going to go. The why drives the decisions that we make. My why is rooted in both wanting to champion public ed, as well as, truthfully, shift how our system serves every kid. What I want to know, though, is why you're here. Why are you here? And so I'll put this up. Turn to an elbow partner. Why are you here? Why are you an educator? Why White Bear? Why are you here? I mean, you could literally say, because I get paid, right? Which is fine. It's a why. But I want to know, take a minute to consider, what's your why? Why are you sitting where you're sitting? Elbow partner, go. I blew past this slide. I put my cell phone up, I put my Twitter account up because when I do, in terms of the learning part, in terms of education, I've said this before, I actually, though honored, super honored, and I'm not hopefully not being mean, but basically, I don't believe keynotes do anything. Honestly, I don't actually think they change anything. I don't think conferences change anything. I don't think workshops change much. Right? Like, oh, totally playing into teachers' hands. Right? Who had to attend a zillion of that stuff. Actually, the thing that changes things in terms of learning, it's practice, and a ton of it. Like, if you want to change something, you have to choose it yourself, and you have to practice a ton. This is why the learning part for kids, it's better if they process. That's them practicing something for themselves over and over and over until they get better at it. The same is true for adults. The difference between kids and adults are terrible at change. Just terrible. We're awful. We're slow, like really slow, and we complain a lot. We are very, very grumpy, all of these sort of these habits. We're also super defensive. We're wonderful students. I put my cell phone up here to indicate that I can't run a learning session without getting assessment, without getting some kind of feedback. That if I don't know whether or not what I'm talking about is making a difference or helping folks or not helping folks, it's not working. That's not teaching. That's not learning. It's difficult to actually run assessments with 1,000 people when people are sitting up there, right? So here's my mild attempt at an assessment. Text me. As we're doing the session, and sometimes I feel like this is hard for Minnesotans, so I'm gonna push a little bit. Like, I do not mind if you text me. I want you to. I want you to say, yes, that makes a difference. Ooh, that's interesting. I have another question. I want you to tell me these things. If you tell me these things, I know whether or what's hitting and what's not. You could write, I think you're full of crap. Totally fine. It actually is helpful data to know whether or not what I'm talking about is making a difference. And so I would highly, highly encourage you, please send me the feedback as we go along through this session. I go to the why here. Let me pull this up. Here's my why. I know, super easy, man. It's easy to get the ahs. These are my boys. My why has changed over time. Having children, they're older than this now, but I like the cute picture. Right? My why is driven by wanting to assure that my kids get an amazing public education, that they experience both the public part and the education part in the systems that they're in. Honestly, when my boys came into the world, I was not prepared, not only just as a parent, but when this one came out, I was like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever noticed redheads before. Like, who is this? Blue eyes. Like, he has to have so much suntan lotion on. Like, it's crazy. That when he is born, my world massively changes. It shifts how I've never really considered that I'd be raising a Scottish kid, you know? Like. And so, knowing that how I was raised and what meant something to me, that being raised by my grandparents, the sacrifices that they went through, the sacrifices that my mother went through, I strongly identify as a Mexican person. That I'm like, what do I do with this? So we named them. This is Joaquin Roberto Almanzan. Right? And this is Pablo Alberto Almanzan. And what I love about it, is that already what's happened for him is that he goes to school, Joaquin has gone to school, and in attendance, literally teacher calling out, Joaquin, here. No, where's Joaquin? And he's like, I'm seriously, like, that's my name. it's an overt interruption. It's an interruption that has people say, like, when people go, God, you don't look Mexican, my response is usually, what do Mexicans look like? Yeah, right. We look like a lot of things. In fact, when people say things to me like, Jamie, do you think our challenges around race will change when people are interracially marrying and have lots of kids of mixed race and da-da-da-da-da? I'm like, that happened. It's called Latin America. Latin America is that whole thing. Everybody in Latin America is mixed. Everyone. And racism is fine. It's doing fine in Latin America. So if you're worried about, well, maybe my dad, don't worry, it's fine. That there's still a conversation around race. If Charlottesville teaches us anything, there's still a conversation around race that needs to happen. And so the overt interruption for me was like, how do I help this kid navigate the multiple things that he's from? And this was a way for me to force the issue. I will definitely probably be paying therapist bills down the line, but yeah, right now it's fine. Over this session, I have 3 ideas that I want to talk about, key ideas. I've talked about the concept of engaging in equity. I've talked about, I want to talk about a little bit about this concept of implicit bias, and I want to talk a little bit about how to interrupt implicit bias. Those are the 3 ideas that I want to go at. I put them up so that I want to know, is that what you expected? When you see my name on the program, when you hear Wayne's message about every school, about strong community, does this resonate for you? Take a minute, elbow partner. How do those outcomes sound? That truthfully, I got 40 minutes. In 40 minutes, how do those sound? Elbow partner, how do those sound to you? Go. All right. So, Wayne mentioned this idea of the concept of the opportunity gap. I want to frame the problem from the position of opportunity gap as opposed to the language that we've heard in the past of achievement gap. If you frame the problem as the achievement gap, then you're looking at the achievement of students as the problem. Therefore, what you will try to do, if you're going to solve the problem, is solve kids, is try and fix kids. Kindergarten teachers, where are you? Raise your hand, kindergarten teachers, right? Preschool teachers in the room, right? They're 4, right? How did the 4-year-old become he just showed up. Like, how is he the problem? Like, he's not. He's 4. The problem isn't the achievement of the kids. The problem is the gap in the opportunities and the experience of those opportunities between kids, that they aren't experienced in the same way. Right? Achievement is merely the outcome as a result of those disparate opportunities. That's all it is. The question to me, in terms of working towards equity, is understanding that I'm actually trying to meet the needs of the kids for whom the opportunities aren't working, which is really hard because most of the time I'm very, very attached to the opportunities that I created as a teacher. I work really hard. And so I become I'm like, the opportunity's there, here it is, I did it. I worked really hard on that. And well, if they're not taking it, it's on them. Well, that's limited in my own thinking. That equity is about removing the predictability. That right now it's predictable as to which kids do well and which kids don't. I got one text that said, when we think about equity and diversity, we should be thinking about multiple different things. It's not just race. I fully agree. Although I do want to say that when people say this school is diverse or our district is becoming more diverse, they rarely think that we're getting more Scottish kids. Right? That diversity, when they say our school is really diverse, what they mean is there's lots of kids of color there. That's what they mean. And so if we're going to label kids of color as diverse, then I want to ask the question, what are they diverse from? Because diversity simply means difference. That's all that means. So that would mean that they're different from something. What? What are they different from? That's the conversation. That's the predictability part. To interrupt the inequitable practices that we see, which is really hard to interrupt because, I'll pull this question up, because a bunch of people really care and yet create inequity. I have yet to meet the teacher who got into teaching to make sure that certain kids don't make it. Like, nobody, if you chose the profession, honestly, you chose the profession to try and target and bully particular kids. That's what you want to do. Why are you grading papers on a Sunday? Like, that's crazy. There are ways to do that without having to do half the work. People don't choose it for that reason. People are well-intentioned, they care a ton, they believe in public ed, everything. Their heart is into it. So then, how is it that well-intentioned people create inequity? Why? My belief is that what I say I care about and what I do, they don't match. They don't match. That I have a belief about what I care about, and then I act in a way that's honestly responsive to me. This is not because I'm a bad person, this is because I'm a person. In fact, the frame, the concept, how many people have heard of the phrase culturally responsive teaching before, right? All right, all that means is teaching. That's all that means, honestly. The concept of culturally responsive teaching as some special thing is false. If it's a human being working with another human being, it is inherently culturally responsive. The question isn't whether or not it is culturally responsive. The question is to whom it responds. That's the question. My classroom was extremely culturally responsive to me. It was great for me. If there were kids that were like me, they did very well in my classroom, although they weren't my favorite. My favorite were kids who were nothing like me, but pretended to be like me for the period, you know? I thought they were hilarious, they were amazing and super smart. I'm like, wow, this kid's nothing like me. You're from Vietnam, and wow, you are wonderful. That kid had figured out my cadence, my vocabulary, my sense of humor, and was using it. So that all I did, we would go to team meeting and be sitting around talking about this one kid. We'd be like, he's amazing. And everyone's like, yeah, I know, I think he's wonderful. Literally, that kid's doing it 8 different times a day, right? Switch, 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 over and over and over. And they're like, oh, he's ego stroking all of us. My hardest group of kids were kids that were nothing like me, but refused to pretend to be like me. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't get it. I'm like, what's wrong? There must be something wrong at home, a lot of trauma, dealing with trauma, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that was happening was I didn't realize that I was very committed to people being like me. In fact, what I've learned about learning is that you don't matter. Only the kid matters. Nick's example, Mr. Johnson, what Mr. Johnson did. Mr. Johnson said, oh, he's interested in this. He's interested in fantasy-based basketball. Get out of the way. Let him go. Let him play. And boom, off he went. In that book that I mentioned, First School, Sharon also found, Dr. Ritchie also found that kids learned more, not necessarily targeted, but learned more if teachers literally put materials in the center of the table and said nothing. Let kids play with the materials than if teachers talked about the materials the entire time. Kids learned more. Random, scattershot, more learning than if you talked about it, if you lectured. As a high school teacher, I think I talked 110% of the time. I think there was a point at which I was still talking as kids were walking out the door. Like, you know, like bell rung, don't forget, blah, 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 like, shut up. My intention doesn't match my action. And so why? I have a reason why, or at least I have a starting place to think about it. And that is that this concept of implicit bias, that in our brains we use 100% of our brains. I'll start with this. We'll use 100% of our brains. Human beings don't just use a part of it, it's the entire thing. About 10 to 15% is conscious to us, meaning about 85% is subconscious. Your brain is processing subconsciously more information than your conscious brain can even think of. In fact, I love the example of your subconscious brain right now is making your liver work, right? It's making your heart pump. It's the fact that you're sitting in this space is because your subconscious brain is doing a ton of work for you. Your conscious brain is focusing on the fact that you're at a chair, you're sitting in a stage, you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to sit this close, he's really close, he's spitting on me, whatever. That implicit bias is the idea, and all bias is the processing of information, the categorization of information, and it happens in the subconscious. So that large 85% is where implicit bias lies. So first, if you ever meet a person that says, you know what, I checked my biases at the door, I don't have any biases, they're actually indicating to you that they are no longer human, some sort of zombie maybe. All human beings use bias to make meaning of the world, period. Period. The question is whether or not I'm aware of the meaning that it's making. Can I use my conscious brain to interrupt my subconscious brain when my subconscious brain makes meaning that isn't helpful? And so I take it to this idea. I want to show you it subconscious processing in action. Read that. Got it? All right. If you got it, what just happened in your brain as you read that left side, you're like, oh, that's fun. Oh, he misspelled a bunch of things. Your subconscious brain uses implicit bias in order to figure out patterns or algorithms so that you don't have to use your conscious brain to do it. In the beginning, when you learn something new, you apply your conscious brain. When you apply that 15%, it takes every ounce of that 15% of your brain power to learn the new thing. It's really, really taxing. And when you ask the 15% to learn this new thing, in this case, reading, what happens is it's not doing what it's designed to do. The 15% is primarily designed to scan for threat. That's what it does. Its 50% is scanning for either physical or social threat. That's the bulk of its power. That's what it does. And anytime you ask it to do something other than scan for threat, your subconscious freaks out and goes, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, scan for threat, scan for, you're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger. And so your conscious brain's going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So it says, help me find a pattern or an algorithm, use a categorization process that lets me no longer have to think consciously about this thing. In this case, for reading, first letter, last letter, middle doesn't matter. They're gone. Now it's in your subconscious. You can go back to scanning for threat. I know people scan for threat by where you chose to sit. Those all of you sitting up there scanning for social threat, you're like, well, I know where I'm sitting, up here. No one will see me, right? That is a scan for, or where are my friends? Where's my friends? Where are my friends? Where are my friends? Here you are, oh my God. Why did you sit in front? That is a scan for social threat. That is a scan for social threat. The bias process is merely the categorization process. That's all it is. And so what I want to show you is a brief video on what it takes to shift a bias. That once you have a bias, what does it take to shift it, to change it? So I'm going to show a quick video and then we're going to have a conversation about that. Here we go.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. I did something that damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels, every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this way. Okay. All right, just a second. All right, so, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Wait. No, you have to keep your feet on. Dude, all right, give it a go. Just give it a go. Wait. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. Ready, go. And go. Oh, go! All right, back up. Okay, wait. Keep your feet on the pedal. Go. Go right on. Wait. Just keep your feet on the pedals. Handles on. Yeah, come on. All right, one more time. Okay.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck. But at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut.
Are you gonna give up?
No.
Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up, you got it. Did you see his brain get it? So he, in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult.
It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child.
All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over.
Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm gonna see if somebody brings a bicycle and I'm gonna try to ride a normal bike. It's backwards, it's backwards.
This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but in this moment, I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that all I proved is that I could only redesignate that bias.
So what you're not seeing is just a group of people here looking at me, looking at the strange American that can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right.
After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment.
I got it. I'm back. Oh, it clicked. Hold it, it clicked. I got it. Okay, there it is. There was the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike.
I tried to explain this to the people around me, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was faking the previous 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anybody to believe me.
That looked like I faked that, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just a fake. You think I'm faking. You don't believe me. so weird to be like, la, 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 and it's, you think I'm lying, don't you? I'm not lying.
I felt like the only person on the planet who had ever unlearned how to ride a bike, and I couldn't articulate it to anyone because everybody just knew that you can't forget how to ride a bike. So I learned 3 things from this experiment. I learned that welders are often smarter than engineers. I learned that knowledge does not equal understanding. And I learned that truth is truth, no matter what I think about it. So be very careful how you interpret things because you're looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not. I'm Destin. You're getting smarter every day. Have a good one.
Okay, if you want to support Smarter Every Day, you can download a free audiobook at audible.com/smarter. I recommend Commander Hadfield's book, which is An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. I read it. It was awesome. If you think about it, I had to learn how to ride a different kind of bicycle, and my son did as well. But Commander Hadfield had to learn how to ride a different spaceship. Not only that, but a different type of space station. He was on Mir and the International Space Station. Anyway, if you're interested in supporting Smarter Every Day, audible.com/smarter, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. I'm Destin, getting smarter every day. Have a good one.
Everything's wrong. Instinct reaction's wrong.
Why don't you ride it? You just build it?
I can't ride it. I just build it.
All right. I like the reading connection. I like the reading connection to frame implicit bias because of the algorithm processing. I like the video because of the simplicity that he identifies in what it takes to shift a bias. I've got a way of thinking. To shift that way of thinking requires 8 months every day of practicing something in order to cause it to switch. And in that process, anything very simple could still cause him to go back to the old way of processing. And that he realizes that there's actually just a designation, like he still has the other bias. He can ride an old bike, but it took him a minute. He couldn't flip-flop, he couldn't toggle quickly. 20 minutes, though, to flip back to the old one. All of that, I think, is fantastic. Honestly, I don't care whether the guy rides a backwards bike or not. Like, it does not matter, has zero impact on me. I do enjoy when this kid falls on the ground and the bike's on top of the kid, and he's like, get up, you're fine, right? There's a part of me that likes that because I think in the moment he's experiencing what teachers experience when a kid learns something. All the other stuff is gone. The kid might be in tears because of something, but you learned it! Yes! I enjoy that. What I think is really interesting is that what if the bias, instead of about being a physical thing or a bike or whatever, what if it's about a person? There's more than one text that came in that talked about, what about the assumptions that we make about the families that we serve? If somebody doesn't come to parent-teacher conference, what do we think about that? They signed up, well, how come they didn't come? Yeah, right. Those biases are really hard to interrupt. Really hard to interrupt. Mostly because either A, they make me feel bad about the kind of person that I am, if I think about it, and B, I've got no feedback, no tool to show me that I have that bias in the first place. In fact, I'd argue that most teachers don't actually have very good feedback loops at all. At all. When feedback for teachers or for kids in addition come only connected to eval, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. In fact, if you want to improve the district right now as it relates to serving every single kid, stronger communities decouple eval and feedback. You have to deconnect it. As it relates to grading, grades and feedback can't be connected. If you grade every piece of feedback that you give to kids, high-performing kids will be wondering why they got an A-. There'll be copious numbers of feedback as to why, but they won't look at it. They'll look at the grade. Kids who get Fs won't look at the feedback that you gave them. Kids will only see that they're an F. In fact, they'll consider themselves to be F people. And taking up that moniker makes it very difficult that's now a bias that they have about themselves that create the same outcomes that we see. I put the idea of shifting bias because it is biases that create the opportunities. That because I have biases, I create opportunities that I perceive to be open to everyone, and yet they aren't. I don't think we measure our success based on kids who took advantage of the opportunities. I think you should measure our success based on kids who do not. And if they don't, how come? What did I miss? I taught in my last teaching gig was in Palo Alto Unified, high-performing district, similar demographics to White Bear Lake. Predominantly white, the students of color coming from, African-American Latino kids coming from East Palo Alto. It's on the other side of the 101 freeway. And the difference between the two towns, the two communities, is stark. When you drive from East Palo Alto into Palo Alto, you know. You go from almost very few trees, liquor stores in East Palo Alto, into gated communities instantaneously. It's a completely different thing. In this district, a lot of kids did very well, very, very well. I know that I wasn't that good of a teacher because the substitute teacher who I would get on occasion, because I came to a keynote like this, I was sitting in the audience, I had written meticulous subplans. My high-performing kids performed no different, whether it be for me or for a random person reading off of a script. That would indicate that I didn't matter. In that moment, I did not matter. In fact, I actually think it could have been one of those cymbal monkeys, and that kid would do fine. That kid would do fine. In fact, it was the kid for whom the relationship between me and that kid is what actually kept the kid coming to school. I may not be a very good teacher, and I believe that was true. I believe I was a terrible teacher. Didn't know how to assess, didn't know how to deal with grades, didn't know how to, but I liked people. I liked kids. And as a result, that got me in relationship with some of the lower performing kids. When I wasn't there, they're boom, complete destruction in terms of their own experience in the classroom. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't creating any kind of new opportunity or different way of thinking that would allow those kids that were struggling or relying on me to accelerate. Because truthfully, it's not about me. Though the relationship helps, in the end, they still have to do it on their own. How do I do that? There was a text that came in there that said, what do I do about this? How do I do something? I'm like, that's the question. I love that question, the concrete. The first thing is, well, what biases do we have? How would you know? Elbow partner, talk about that. What are the current biases that you believe are impacting the students and families that we serve right here in White Bear Lake? Go. All right. In terms of the concrete, there are concrete things that you can do. I would love to talk about them. I've got some simple ideas. The simplest is this, that if what we want to do is interrupt some of the implicit biases that we may subconsciously put forth, thus creating inequitable opportunities for the students that we want to serve, so that we have strong communities, strong schools. Get better at this. Knowing how to do that as a skill. Knowing how to default to that over what I'm doing right now. This very structure promotes me talking as opposed to listening. Flipping it is going to take 8 months or longer every day of practice over and over and over. Learning how to do that to every single kid, much like Mr. Johnson with Nick, takes practice. It takes practice. If we listen, if we learn to listen, here's what can happen. All right? We can interrupt implicit biases by first creating space for other people to share their experiences. That when you listen first as opposed to talk, you give space for someone else to describe the experience. There's a great quote by Dr. Wade Davis that says, "Other people's cultures are not failed attempts at being you." I love that quote because your brain actually believes that they are. In fact, if you ever found yourself going, well, why the hell would they? If you ever found yourself saying that, that's you believing that the way you do it is better than the way they do it. Right? You have no understanding as to why they would have done that. So if I create space, Other people's experiences are prioritized, and it interrupts my own thinking. And in fact, what usually happens is I go, you're thinking about it wrong. In fact, you're probably living wrong. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. I nailed it. I nailed it. Follow me. Once I do that, if I can actually listen and prioritize others, I can support change. I can support change through practice with people. That by listening over and over to perspectives different from my own, what can happen is my own brain can change. What I like about this idea is when people talk about equity, they often frame it from the position of that we need to do a better job of serving marginalized kids. Kids that can't read, kids that are struggling with discipline, kids that are da-da-da, who are often, predictably, kids in poverty, kids learning English, kids of color, etc. It frames the problem as the deficit of them. And as I think about my own children who are being raised identifying, part of their identity is as a Mexican, they're fine. In fact, my youngest, Pablo, he's special needs. He's special needs. And so as a result, he's nonverbal. He's 6. He's nonverbal still. He's fine. He has no problems. The idea that he has a problem is because other people think he has a problem. Not because he thinks he has a problem. He's great. He's amazing. He has a disorder that's called Phelan-McDermid. His disorder actually causes for more dopamine to be released in his brain than most typically developing people. Dopamine is the joy hormone. It's the thing that causes you to be happy. Pablo will always be happier than me. Always. Like, it's spectacular. Like, he's like, no, it's good, things are good. You're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm like constantly depressed about everything. I'm a good Catholic. That change comes because I support practice over and over with people who have perspectives different from my own. When we frame the problem as there's a problem with the kid, we don't realize that there's a problem with the kids that we think are succeeding as well then. In fact, if we have kids who are going through schools right now and are often surrounded by kids who are just like them, who look like them, who think like them, we are not challenging those kids. In fact, I argue we have low expectations for those kids. High expectations would look like this. A white kid who went to White Bear Lake schools, valedictorian of their class, had gone through multiple classes with lots of kids very similar to them, would realize when they graduate that if they go on to Princeton or Harvard or Dartmouth, that would just replicate the very experience that they just had. Why would they do that? The valedictorian equity would be if that valedictorian chose Howard, chose Spelman. She chooses Spelman because she realizes a historically black college, because she realizes that if she goes to Princeton, she'll be surrounded by more kids that are just like her. Why? There's no point to that. Why not choose something that pushes her own thinking, pushes her own growth? That is pushing my own, that's practice with people who think differently from me. When that happens, I build relationships across difference. I'm able to actually connect with people who are different from me. And it is through listening that each of these things happen. Each of these things happen. When I am able to do that, I can start to understand how this, let me go back, sorry. There we go. I can understand, if I can listen, what I can start to realize is that first, implicit bias is a part of me. That it's a categorization process, simply that. I'm not a bad person, I'm just a person. I realize that those patterns, those biases, create my beliefs, my behaviors, my actions. From that, those pathways connected to me, all the multiple ones, create what I call a singular cultural schema, meaning I think the world operates the way I think. First and foremost, I've got a bunch of beliefs. This is what Jamie thinks, this is how the world operates. It's only in connection to multiple different folks that I can create what's called a collective belief system. One that has shared. If it's always like people like me, it won't actually challenge the one in blue. It won't shift my personal. It won't push me to grow. If the one in blue is connected to multiple ones, multiple different collective beliefs, attitudes, I am pushed to be a more rounded person, a more thoughtful person, honestly, a smarter person. Equity, the outcome of equity is that. I end on this idea that if you want to know what to do these 3 things. And that I haven't gotten to check, the text thing totally worked. Now I'm like, oh, Jesus, I got to answer everybody. Number 1, honestly, this first skill, do this. This simply means shut up. Like, as I'm talking, like, shut up, stop talking. Like, that's the answer. Learn to listen to others first. Second, listen for where your perspective or your experience is different from someone else's. Not to judge theirs, not to judge your own, just to notice the difference. If you can notice the difference, you can start to realize where your biases lie. And that from there, I can actually use someone else's biases, someone else's ideas to help them grow and change. Because it is only in the third one. This is teaching. The third one's teaching. That honestly, how I see the world doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how the kid sees the world, how the kid makes meaning of it. The kid doesn't know may not know the content, but they know how to think for themselves. Let them do that. I was constantly in the way, wanting to make sure that they got it the way I got it, because I had it such a smart way to think about it. I don't matter, and I don't matter. It doesn't mean that I don't matter for relationships. It just means that how to think is rooted in them taking the time, getting the opportunity to do that. I end on this idea about listening by Margaret Wheatley. She says, when we begin listening to each other and when we talk about things that matter to us, the world begins to change. Everyone has the capacity to be able to figure out how to make a difference. Listening and talking to one another heals our divisions and makes us brave again. That in the current context of our society, I cling to this idea. I promote listening as a way to interrupt implicit biases, as a way to actually achieve equity in school districts, because though we are content-driven, that's not our strength. If anything proved it, it's the fact that we have multiple ways of getting information, that we have the internet, we have all of these different things. Content isn't the thing. What we have that makes us strong is people. And so I focus on listening, because if we listen to each other, if we listen to kids, if we listen to families, we have structures to do that, we can be a strong community. We can be a strong school. And honestly, we'd be strong tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Joining us on the stage as we wrap up today's event are the White Bear Lake Area High School cheerleaders. Please rise as the team leads us in the high school song printed in your program.
White Bear is our glorious name.
Thank you all for attending the 2017 opening convocation. A special thank you to all those who made today's events possible. And remember, say it with me on 3. 1, 2, 3. Go Bears!
Maybe I'll be in